Welcome to Alive in Writing, a podcast on troubleshooting life as a writer.
I'm Shatona Havoc.
I'm April Heyman.
And I'm C.R. Rowanson. We're here.
We're alive.
And we're writing. All right, Clark, you've been talking about how, as writers and people, we are not alone. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? I mean...
We're all here in the same room. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's just part of it. Really what it is for me is whenever I'm dealing with hardships, I've been having lots of problems with anxiety lately. And, well, the entire time I've been trying to be a writer, I've been dealing with nonstop anxiety and overwhelm and all sorts of other issues where I just want to quit. And what's really helped me a lot is just the concept that everybody else has gone through the same thing. It doesn't really matter whether it's a good issue or it's a bad issue. There's going to be somebody else out there who has either already dealt with it or is going through it now. And that's really helpful to me.
Yeah, you're not alone. Shocker.
I know. Can I make a point that it's not you're trying to be a writer, that you actually are a writer?
Preach it.
Just saying.
Fair enough. Well, okay, as a writer,
Thank
you.
you.
Is that better? As a writer, whenever I'm dealing with these things, it's helpful for me to realize that other people are going through similar problems. And it's not just with my writing. When I'm at work, and I still work full-time at the moment, I'm sorry. It's going to be a slow transition, but that's how it goes. When I'm at work, I can't go full bore all the time, and I start getting down on myself because I can't focus for 9 hours straight. Go figure. And just knowing that I'm not the only person in the building that is having that issue, it makes it easier to handle. I don't know. Does that make any more sense to you, Shatona?
Yeah. And if you think about it, you realize at that point, then they are also sitting there thinking, I'm sitting here being inefficient and unproductive, and everybody else around me isn't, when that's actually not true. Everybody's thinking the same thing.
Right.
I don't know. Do you guys have any cases where you've discovered something similar? Has this concept helped you at all since I've been talking about it so much?
I don't know if it's helped me so much as I can relate. It's not for the writing bit, because since I've been writing, I've really not been alone. I write in a group most of the time. But when I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in 2010, there wasn't anyone, I didn't know anyone who was going through the same thing as I was. And I really did feel isolated and alone. You know, my husband and family were very supportive, and they loved me very much, but they weren't going through the same thing. And so when we moved back to California, I was able to find an autoimmune disorders group in town. It was just like this big relief off my shoulders, where there was finally someone who understood. I didn't have to explain what the test meant. I didn't have to try to tell them what the pain and the swelling was like. They'd already gone through it. Having someone who'd been there, done that was truly helpful.
So you weren't alone.
I was not alone.
Imagine that.
So Shatona's been giving me a hard time for quite a while about this, and I don't think the end is really in sight as far as that goes. But I brought this up because this is such a big deal to me, and I've been kind of pushy. This is actually kind of the theme of our next chapter for the podcast. Is all of the stuff that we're talking about is really related to the fact of letting you, as our listener, know that you're not alone. Any of the problems you're having, we have them too. We want to sit down and we want to talk about how we have dealt with them, hopefully ways that you can deal with them, or even just, commiserate in the pain.
Commiserate's good. Commiserate's good. I think for extreme introverts, I am definitely an extreme introvert. I need lots of refuel time. Some might call it selfishness. I like extreme introvert because it sounds less, selfish. But I think it becomes really easy for us to exist in a vacuum, where we become our own little bubble in our own little world, like the Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella syndrome. You're in that corner. And it's really easy to push others out, but when you realize that you're not alone, that means that you actually can't stay alone either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's almost a part of our culture, really, as things, compared to a lot of other countries in the world. The U.S. is very sparsely populated. I know it's really weird to say if you've been to any cities, but when you compare to a lot of other countries, the entire middle of our continent is very low people per square mile. And so we get used to being by ourselves. We're taught that you aren't supposed to talk about your problems. That's something that you're supposed to go deal with at home. And you don't want to show any weakness. And I think that's a real problem. I think that causes more issues than it actually solves.
That rugged American individualism. You
Right.
know? Yeah.
But I have to say,
bootstraps and
if we hadn't had any of that, we probably wouldn't have written in the first place. So being independent is not necessarily a bad thing. It's when you isolate yourself or get to a point where you feel isolated. So I think one may feed into the other. I don't necessarily think that they are mutually exclusive. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
that is a really good point. I think technology is a very strange thing. It's got a juxtaposition there because on the one hand, it brings, it makes me think of an old movie where it said airplanes turned the whole world into neighbors. I think the internet is the one that really did that. I mean, I have friends that I've never met and will never meet from Africa and Australia and just all over the United States. And we've become friends. We've become very close. But it also does the exact opposite in that it allows you to stay in that little bubble, in that little realm that you allow how much interaction, and you allow yourself to stay alone even while you're interacting.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think it's a combo, you know?
I argue with people a lot that Facebook isn't real socializing. It does allow you to connect. Like, you can connect with those people from across the world, which is awesome, by the way. A little jealous of all that. That's really cool.
Oh,
Because
man.
didn't you say you had people you'd never met before show up at your daughter's wedding?
Yeah, at my daughter's wedding, we have family in the state with us here. They didn't come, but I had people that I had known on this message board that I've run for the last 15 years. They came from Kansas and Wyoming and Idaho and Northern California, which sounds like, you're in California, what's the big deal? Yeah, it's 12 hours.
That's so awesome, though.
It's a giant state, so it's a long time between us. They came from everywhere, people that we had never actually met. We'd only talked to online. They showed up for my daughter's wedding. They're real relationships, but they're not a substitute for in-person relationships. On the other hand, speaking of Facebook, my sister-in-law and I did not know each other at all. And I'm probably going to get emotional here, sorry. But they lived in Minnesota, we lived in California. I think I saw her 4 or 5 times in my entire marriage. And then Facebook came along and we started talking. And to be frank, I had never really liked her. I didn't dislike her, but I didn't like her. There was nothing about her to like or dislike. I didn't know her. And on Facebook, I discovered I really liked her. We had so much fun. We really got to know each other. And it was the greatest blessing because then she died. And I hadn't gotten to see her in probably 10, 15 years. But I knew her before she died. Her dying actually affected me in a way it wouldn't have without Facebook.
Well, that makes my argument sound fairly invalid.
No, I actually agree with your argument.
Yeah, so my point is I know a lot of people who will spend all day just clicking on posts, liking, and to me that's not the same as connecting with people.
No.
Which I'm glad you brought up the technology aspect because we have so many tools to connect with other people, but you have to make sure you're using it for a real connection and not just a temporary busy connection.
Exactly.
So speaking of real connections, I think it's time for the spotlight.
Awesome. So I'm the one who kind of preached a lot of this episode. What I wanted to talk about was National Novel Writing Month. That's actually in November, but we're in the middle of Camp Nano. Is that right, April?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. So Camp Nano is if you aren't familiar with National Novel Writing Month, that takes place in November, and the goal there is to write 50,000 words in a single month. The reason I wanted to bring this up is that's actually how I met these two ladies.
Yay!
And here we are, a couple years later, making a podcast together. So it's a really great way to connect with people. Actually, April, you're our local liaison, so I'm going to let you explain more about Camp Nano.
Okay, well, thank you, Clark. I am the kind of the de facto leader, or I volunteer. So I'm the municipal liaison for our area, and basically what I do is I make sure we have space to gather as a group. but in the springtime, and I think there's one in the summer too. In July, there is Camp Nano, and Camp Nano is still writing within a month, like National Novel Writing Month. The difference is that you set your own goal. They also have the group set up a little bit differently. So instead of being regionally divided, you're actually put into what they call cabins. So you can be in a cabin with someone from Australia or your friend who moved to New York, whatever you want to put yourself into a random cabin, or you can set it up so you have a private cabin with your friends. The big thing, though, is that you set your own writing goal. So maybe
And it doesn't have to be a novel.
Right. It doesn't have to be a novel. It can be a script. It can be a graphic novel. It can be poetry.
Blog posts.
The other cool thing
posts.
is this episode is coming up in April, but it's still not too late. Even if you don't listen to this until there's 1 week left in April of 2017, you can still just jump in and do whatever you want, right? Right,
Yes.
guys? I'm not just making stuff up.
Nope.
Not only that, if you listen to this in May, you can get geared up for July.
That's right.
Or if you listen to it later, I'm sure we'll be getting ready for Nano in November, so there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Nano is like my thing. It is my month that I get to write whatever I want, and the publicist can just deal with it.
So yeah, just go check out Nano. They have a website, and it's really awesome. You can meet so many different people. Again, it's how I met these two, and it's worked out pretty well.
And
we haven't fooled, April.
Yes. The URL is in the notes at, I think it's the bottom of the screen.
Yes, it'll be in the liner notes. So the concept, going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, just the concept by itself, it's sort of a mental exercise for me whenever I start freaking out about something, to just step back and tell myself, you're not the only person who's dealt with this. You may want to think you're this special, unique person that is the only one like you on this planet of, 7 billion people now? But there's other people who have shared experiences, and that's a good thing. So for me, from there, I had to start moving forward to find people, because when I started writing, I started in isolation. And so I had to go out and find people to talk about writing with, people who could teach me, and that's eventually how I met these guys. But what I want to bring it around to is there's kind of a trick I've found that's been very helpful in connecting with people when you don't want to be alone anymore. And that's to focus on helping them.
Yeah.
So if I've been having tons of problems with anxiety lately, and I have a friend who's been dealing with a rough patch of depression, and my wife deals with depression, and other people in my family deal with that. So instead of getting too caught up trying to get people just to help me, I've been doing everything I can to help them, because I am getting a better understanding of what they're going through.
Yeah.
And that's a really good point. We've been talking about you're not alone as a writer, but don't forget that there's other people out there who aren't writers.
Whole world,
By the way.
A lot of them.
That can be helpful. I mean, they may not be a writer, but they may sit there and listen to you as you talk about your difficulties, maybe with the story, or like my husband just sits there and nods as I pace back and forth and
which is just as important.
Yes. Kind of hatch out my plot, and he says, "Yes, babe, that's great. Do that."
Sounds so good. Everything's flawless.
Exactly.
I don't know. That's sounding like yes men, but
Yeah, you know what? I just tell my husband, smile and nod, smile and nod. Just let me vent. I need to vent, and it doesn't work to vent to a blank wall. I don't know why. It should, but it doesn't.
That's that shared commiseration.
yeah.
Yeah, you're making him miserable. Well, you're miserable. It's great.
Exactly.
And I'm sure we'll have other episodes about dealing with yes men and stuff like that. Actually, later, we're going to be talking about cheerleaders, which are a specific type of support that everybody needs to get.
Absolutely. But you know what's really interesting is that I actually now need to eat crow. I hope it's well seasoned, because it sounds really gross. But I blame Poe. No, Raven, sorry. But
bad joke.
It's too early for me.
Moving on.
Right. But I have a You're Not Alone story. Gulp. Okay.
Oh, really? Go on.
Yep. Sorry. Here I was sitting here going, yeah, I get it, Clark. I get it, but I don't. Yeah, I get it. Marketing. Marketing was my you're not alone moment. And it actually didn't come until after I was able to help other people realize that they are not alone. That's when I realized that, oh, yeah, I actually wasn't alone. I felt very alone. You have your book. You've got this shiny new book. And how do you get it in front of people who want to read it? Because let's face it, that feels schmarmy. Everybody has seen it on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, everywhere you go. It's buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. I did not want to be that person. I mean, who wants to be that person, right? And then I met someone who is a marketing guru. She finds it fun. And I thought she was nuts. I mean, fun marketing? Really? What's the matter with her? But guess what? Marketing actually is fun when you totally change your mind about what the purpose of marketing is. And I'm not going to let myself go into it because I really want to, and we need to do that some other day.
That'll be an episode we do another time.
Right. So instead, the point is that when I had people coming to me going, how do I get my book in front of people? And I was able to help them and show them. It's like, look, I've been there. I know how hard this is, but guess what? It's not as hard as it seems. It's hard until you get over that hump. It's like running up the first hill when you're doing some sort of race, and then you get down the other side and there's no more hills. And you're like, what? Really? You thought the whole track was going to be all these hills, right? Well, they weren't. And marketing really can be like that if you can get excited about it. But I wasn't alone. And these people weren't alone. And I was able to help, and it was really cool.
And that brings me to the last part of this sort of pattern that I have is if I'm really struggling with something, I have to tell myself that I'm not alone. I need to reach out and find people who are dealing with a similar issue. And my first thing, instead of just going in and telling them what I need, I try and help them with their problems. I'm not always great at it, but that's what I try and do. The last part, which is really hard for me personally, is when they ask, I need to be willing to share my issues. So I recently went on the Writing Excuses cruise and writing retreat, which was awesome. And I got to meet a ton of people there. And I was doing a really good job asking everybody about their books, engaging, talking to them about their plot, because everybody had so many fascinating ideas. And then they would ask me about mine, and I would try and deflect and push away, and it's something I literally just realized I need to work on. So that's sort of the 3 steps I see. I know, April, you had been asking a lot about this. Is this at all sounding helpful to you?
Oh, no, I think it is very helpful. So from what I understand, Facebook can be a good place to connect with others if there's no one in town. NaNoWriMo is also a great place to connect with others who have the same issues that you do. Look to outside sources. I'm thinking also, besides writing groups, conferences are probably a good place to meet others.
And always check for a local writing group. You might be surprised what's in your town.
Right. Yeah, you might. Well, and even, like for me, I'm part of the American Christian Fiction Writers Association. I drive 3 hours once a month to go to that meeting. It's worth it. For this extreme introvert, it's worth it. Just saying.
And with that, we need to wrap it up.
So this has been Alive in Writing. Sometimes that's all you get, but really it's all you need. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.